green is good, right? In the face of late-stage capitalism and urbanization, I guess we'll take what we can get. Yeah, I don't buy that. I'm not satisfied by just any green in my city. Before I go on my academic rampage, let me introduce myself. Hi, I'm Madeline Coley. I'm an undergraduate interdisciplinary student who studies urban ecology. Today we're here to discuss how not all green is created equal. What do I mean when I say green? I'm referring to green space, which there's 3 different kinds. Public reservation sites, national park and heritage sites, and recreational facilities. Public reservation sites, like state parks, are used to preserve modest landscapes for recreation. National park and heritage sites preserve national memory, historic and ecological. And lastly, recreational facilities are built around pre-existing communities. For our purposes, we'll be looking at recreational facilities in cities, hence urban ecology. From now on, I'll use green space synonymously with recreational parks within cities. Now, the idea of urban green space is great, but what about it in practice? These spaces can contribute to a phenomenon called eco-gentrification. Let's break it down. Gentrification is the term used to describe the displacement of low-income and minority groups within cities by more affluent classes. It has 3 main tenets: rising property value, upgrades in the house stock, and turnover of the local populace. One of the definitions of eco-gentrification is the implementation of an environmental planning agenda related to public green spaces that leads to the displacement or exclusion of the most economically vulnerable human population, homeless people, while exposing an environmental ethic. That's a lot. My definition is eco-gentrification refers to an ecological initiative, in our case, green space, that leads to this urban displacement. For our purposes, we'll be using my simplified definition. The study of eco-gentrification is muddled and complex. Why? It belongs to the discipline of ecology. That's a field that's constantly evolving, and by the time a case study is finished, better research is available. As of right now, there's no rigorous empirical studies that have looked at the full picture of gentrification and the contents of appearance, cleanup, reuse, or undesirable land. Displacement is not a well-documented phenomenon. Researchers forgo qualitative data and interdisciplinary focuses due to the sheer complexity of urban ecology. A broad subject allows room for the methodology of this research to vary greatly. For example, one study focuses on the history and allocation of space in Baltimore. It found that minority households had greater access to green spaces. However, their green spaces were subpar. If one of these undesirable spaces were renovated, it would push out the local community and absorb it into a white neighborhood. Another study worked with American rent prices and how nicer parks are associated with higher rates within cities. If something undesirable was there before, new developments had the potential of pricing people out. However, I'm not convinced that nicer green space is the cause of eco-gentrification. Eco-gentrification has to stem from the surrounding forces and systems that interact with the physical space, rather than the space itself. If this feels like a lot, it is. So let me take a step back and illustrate the point I'm trying to make with 2 concrete examples. We'll be examining New York City's High Line and Berlin's Templehofer Feld. The 2 spaces were reconstructed transport centers that opened a year apart. As a reminder, both are recreational facilities located in cities and were built around established communities. The High Line and the Feld are comparable in terms of ecosystem services and face value accessibility. Both places have 3 main entry points with some barriers. The Feld has physical guards and the High Line has steep stairs. Yet only one of these places led to the urban displacement of low-income citizens. Can you guess which one? I'm just kidding, I'm going to tell you. I have 3 guiding questions to help us determine if a city park is a space of eco-gentrification. They can be applied to spaces outside of the ones I'll speak about today. They are: who are the actors? Are they politicians, organizations, or visitors? How did this place come to be? What's its history? And how does the space function? And how are
the actors affected?
These questions encompass many of the ideas brought up in the majority of eco-gentrification studies I did research on, but these questions can also be answered without a ton of research. Of course, for my purposes, there was ample research. Let's start with the High Line, from my home city of New York.
Who are the actors? The actors here are the New York City government, the New York City Parks and Rec Department, the non-for-profit called Friends of the High Line, the local Chelsea community, and the visiting tourists. How did this place come to be? The railway was built in the 1800s and was used until the 1900s. It sat and rotted for years.
The New York City High Line was absorbed by Conrail in the 1930s. This was one of the first public-private agreements in New York City in regards to transportation. The Chelsea property owners wanted the rail gone, as it was a liability to their buildings. The New York City mayoral office agreed, saying that the rail was a gross eyesore that inhibited economic development.
Chelsea, where the High Line is situated, used to be a huge manufacturing hub, but declined in economic value after World War II.
The residents of Chelsea, mainly low-income and minority groups who moved in after the area's economic decline, wanted to keep the rail as it was physical protection from getting priced out. In the 1990s, a new actor took the stage.
The two founders of the non-for-profit Friends of the High Line saw potential in the overgrowth of flora that had taken over the rail.
They leveraged their personal relationship with a current member of the New York City Council and eventually got to the mayor at the time, Bloomberg, to sign off on it. The Friends of the High Line chose neither to be anti-business or anti-gentrification. To get the project off the ground, they had to show the numbers. This leads me to believe that the Friends of the High Line had to prove to the government that the High Line would provide some economic value, other than being a beautiful urban community space. The park opened its doors in 2009, and the rest is history.
How does this place function, and how are the actors affected? The space functions as a 1.45-mile walkway with native and exotic flora dotted along the edges. It serves as a gallery year-round. It attracts about 7 million tourists per year. And according to the New York City government website, this site provides ample economic opportunities.
Since its opening in 2009, many big corporations such as Google and Facebook have since opened office spaces along the High Line. Consequently, residential apartment rates have skyrocketed. Apartments that are directly adjacent or overlook the line experience the steepest increase in rates. The old community of Chelsea has officially been priced out. Has there been displacement? Yes. Can there be displacement again? Also yes.
As of February 2025, there has been a proposal to develop a casino, a large one consisting of almost 2,000 hotel rooms right next to the west end of the High Line. The development will push out the newest Chelsea inhabitants to make room for more corporations.
However, Friends of the High Line is meeting with park supporters in order to stop the new developments. But Friends of the High Line has yet to release a statement on its thoughts. Now, let's discuss Templehofer Feld from Berlin. Meine Liebe.
Now, who are the actors? The Berlin Senate, the Senate Department of Urban Mobility, Transport, Climate Action, and the Environment, the private company Grün Berlin, and the Berlin populace. How did this place come to be? Templehofer Feld is an archaeological site of violence. It was built in the 1920s and was renovated under the Nazi regime with imprisoned labor. Clear sign of spears, Hitler's head architect, were found during an archaeological excavation. During the time of the wall, Templehofer Feld was the airport that the Allied forces used to feed West Berlin. Already, the physical space is drenched in history.
The government was now in control of an onslaught of land with deep historic roots. The redevelopment plan of the Feld was centered towards public value. With a cross-party consensus, the Senate put forward a plan to make Templehofer Feld a public space. The House also stressed that the space was not to be left to private investors on the whole. The sentiment was in major contrast to the last redevelopment project of Berlin. And Grünberlin, a state company, has now stepped in and maintains the now completed park. It holds regular dialogue, according to their website, with Berlin residents.
How does this place function, and how are the actors affected? Templehofer Feld is a 300-hectare park with space for recreational activities on the old airport landing pads and the surrounding trails along the fields.
5% of Berlin's whole population has easy access to the park's 3 entrances. It's located between a few lower-income neighborhoods and has not directly affected the surrounding rent rates. However, the Feld isn't the most culturally inclusive, as only 7% of its visitors are immigrants. Despite this, the Senate has held out its promise.
In 2014, affordable housing plots were proposed to be built on Templehofer. The Senate let the people decide if that should happen, and a majority of citizens said not to develop on the green space. Although the Feld's lack of housing has put a bit more pressure on Neukölln and Kreuzberg to build, it ultimately has kept private investors from taking a piece of the airport pie and gouging out the vulnerable surrounding communities.
Has there been displacement? No. But can there be displacement? Always, yes. Keep your eyes on the Feld. In September 2024, a dialogue between Grünberlin, important members of a redevelopment plan, and private citizens was held. It was 3 weekends long and framed itself as a potential route for the Feld. On the second weekend, however, the private citizens were told that the project proposed weren't hypothetical, but pre-approved. It would allow for the development of the Feld. These statements were redacted, and the mayor of Berlin said a new referendum may appear soon, much like the 2014 one. Also, the space would benefit from more cultural diversity and more open arms towards its immigrant community. But Grünberlin does seem available to talk to those who have ideas to make that happen. There you have it. Eco-gentrification isn't surface level, like any ecosystem you may come across. The New York City High Line actively displaced low-income households through its lack of commitment to the public and the partnership with private entities. The Feld, although adjacent to Berlin's gentrification, is not an ecological site that directly caused any displacement. Its intentionality and practice published mission prevented it from getting to this point, but it's not perfect either, and intentions can always change. The point of this video essay isn't for you to stop believing in the greening of our cities. It's for you to think critically about the spaces around you and their functions. Urban ecology is about sustainability, and eco-gentrification prevents cities from functioning in a sustainable way. If these spaces aren't ours, they're lining someone else's pockets with green. The only good green is our green.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and don't forget to go outside.